must beg you.
And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody, to a free bonus transmission.
This is a special thing. This is Jamie and I's first time covering some films that are playing a film festival for the podcast, and we thought this would be a special time to unlock and do a special bonus transmission for everybody, because we're going to be talking about some films that are, a little bit maybe not on everybody's radar, maybe not even coming out for a couple months, and it might be worth, shining a light on some of these films. And you know, we for anyone on the main feed unfamiliar with the bonus transmission, it is the section over on the Patreon of the show that Jamie and I we talk about new release genre films. We talk about the kind of films that are spiritual successors to the kinds of films that we talk about on the main feed. And we get to have fun. We get to just see what the new filmmakers are trying to bring to the table. And speak for Spooktober especially, it's always a huge month for the bonus transmissions, because sometimes there's so many horror films out. We try to get 2 out, which is something that we're going to be once again doing this month.
Yeah, it's insane, all the new stuff that's dropping online. I've just been pretty much going nonstop. A lot of 3-star classics, but still some decent ones nonetheless.
Absolutely. So definitely look forward to that. We're going to be having a bonus transmission coming out sometime before Halloween, where we're going to be talking about some of the ones you've been waiting for, things like Halloween Ends, Smile, Bodies. I'm trying to remember what other ones that we're going to be covering. The Munsters, Rob Zombie. How could I forget? We got some spooky vibes on the way. But before then, we have this very special bonus transmission for you, where we are going to be talking about some of the films that Jamie and I were able to see at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. So thanks to Adam and Christian over there for giving us some press access so that we could get these films covered and even have a bonus episode ready to go by the time the festival is over. And there's a couple, unfortunately, we weren't able to get access to that we would have liked to cover, because they had a pretty cool slate overall, I would say, of like some pretty international genre cinema that played. They had the new film from Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, Something in the Dirt, that unfortunately we didn't get a chance to check out. They also had the film that I think is going to open in wide release on Halloween weekend, called Pray for the Devil, which looks like Girl Boss exorcism movie. Right. I don't know if did you see that one? It was
no, I didn't.
Yeah, it's like literally like it's like the first woman priest who gets to do an exorcism or something, and there was no screener available for that one, so I'm not sure if they feel the most confident in that one. We'll see. I guess everyone can check it out when it comes out on Halloween weekend, but we didn't get a chance to see that.
I would like to see another decent exorcism movie. They're just so rare nowadays. So maybe, who knows?
Yeah, well, and it's by the guy I think who did The Last Exorcism. Which was that the found footage one? I'm trying to remember. I can't even remember. Either way, that came out in like 2010. I remember that coming out. Like, I remember when it came out in theaters. So I was like, wow, I haven't seen that guy's name in a while.
Yeah, I do remember that title, but I can't remember if I've seen it or not.
Yeah. But either way, they had a pretty cool slate of films, including a documentary about the Child's Play films with Don Mancini. But Jamie and I were only able to catch a few, and we also caught a couple shorts that we want to bring up too to highlight some of those as well. So, but there was a cool selection of international genre cinema, all of which we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be doing one film called Hazard, which was a Belgian film directed by a man named Jonas Govaerts, who's the guy behind a film called Cub, which I've heard people like. And It was a pretty cool little
adrenaline filled.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just like a drug heist gone wrong thriller, but it's filmed entirely in the backseat perspective of the dude's car. So I think some people were comparing it to something like that movie with Tom Hardy called Locke. Sure. But there was actually another one in 2017 that Netflix put out with Frank Grillo called Wheelman, which is a little bit closer to what this actually is, because it's like it's a guy is a driver. He's part of like a crime gone wrong. And it's literally just how does he drive his way out of the various situations, and how does his car just keep getting increasingly destroyed, and how does the situation keep getting worse for him? But 80-minute movie, a lot of fun. We're going to get into that one. And then after, we're going to be talking about one of the ones I was the more excited about and unfortunately disappointed in. We're going to be talking about the new film from Neil Marshall, well known by many for his creature feature sort of action thrillers that he did in the mid 2000s. Actually, when did Dog Soldiers come out? Why am I?
Yeah,
was that even earlier? Was that the 90s?
No, I thought that one was. Let me see. Oh, it was earlier. 2002.
2002. Okay. So it was a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So Dog Soldiers and The Descent. He's obviously the English filmmaker behind those. And he does love the idea of little monsters hanging out in underground caves, which I will say this new film, The LAIR, in terms of premise. Yeah, that's what it is pitched as Neil Marshall's return to his roots after spending a little bit of time doing a failed big budget Hellboy movie and shooting some episodes of Game of Thrones and some other TV as well. So we will be getting into Neil Marshall's new venture, which I will say is interesting, especially because most of his films are now basically direct-to-video movies that are star vehicles for his fiance, and so we will get into how that applies to this new film specifically when we talk about it. And then last in terms of features, we are going to be talking about a film I hadn't even heard of, but I was really glad that I was able to check it out, called Evil Eye, which was a sort of Mexican folklore witchcraft horror film directed by a man named Isaac Esban. And it was really interesting. It has this weird quality where it's almost like a children's horror film. And it's from the point of view of like, maybe the grandma's kind of creepy. And then when it actually becomes a horror film, it's pretty dark and pretty disturbing and more graphic and sort of monster effects driven than I expected of it. And I was pretty impressed with it, actually. Yeah.
And we'll get to it, but it also has a fairly cruel ending too, which I was
really
surprised by. So it's solid.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about all of those. And then at the very end, I think Jamie and I, we each watched quite a few horror shorts that were playing the festival. And we're going to list out, kind of go back and forth, honorable mention style, and almost just list out a couple of the ones that kind of stood out to us. Because we, believe it or not, we have covered shorts before on the podcast. Our good friend Perry made it into the top 10 of the year when he made his short.
Sungazer, I believe.
Sungazer.
Very good.
Great film. We like a good horror short, and there were a couple cool ones that were playing the festival. So yeah, if you want to hear about all those and more, there is some international genre cinema talk about to start here, and we are going to get into it. Let's start off with Hazard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for the first thing for me that pops out about Hazard was how they did the camera work. It's very fluid, and it's constantly showing like every move that he makes. When he's making a decision about driving, they'll do kind of like a close-up of the gauge and then a close-up of him shifting gears. And I think what differentiates it is just how the camera flows between those shots. Like a lot of the time, it's actually very almost stabilized, moving from one thing to another. And it just creates this kind of like adrenaline-filled momentum that I really latched onto quite a bit. And it's a short film, so it's kind of one of those, like, it's pure action, really. It's just like thrills the entire time until it's over. And they have a little bit of like dramatic stuff, but they don't lean too heavily on it, luckily. And so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the basic premise is that it's about this driver named Noah, and he's not a chauffeur. He's not a wheelman. He's a driver. He wants you to know that he's really good at driving. He really loves driving. He loves his car. His car is this kind of like hilariously kind of tacky, like
Need for Speed
gold
Underground kind of thing.
It's absolutely what it looks like, and it's wonderful. It's like it is like a gold encrusted street car.
Yeah.
And the entire soundtrack too is like this like pounding electronic like Euro dance music, which is a lot of fun. That definitely kind of gets the energy going up. And I like this main actor who he's playing this character Noah. The actor is Dimitri Vegas, and apparently he is just like a Euro like DJ or something like that.
Really?
But
Wow.
but he has a really like tough attitude on screen, and he reminded me, honestly, he kind of just looks like Scott Adkins.
Dude, I was literally just gonna say that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Totally.
He absolutely looks like an action star,
I
even
thought he was
though
gonna start kicking and
he's just
shit.
driving a car. Yeah,
He does absolutely give a Scott Adkins vibe, and it's even like the way I guess it's just that tough guy act that really reminds you of it. It's any time that Scott Adkins
and a very
isn't kicking
European
somebody.
kind of tough guy too, with like he's got like a perfectly trimmed beard. He's got like this like fancy lad tracksuit on. Like
Exactly. Yeah, which I think too, if I'm not mistaken, matches the car, which I thought was very funny. Like he's suited up for that vehicle that he loves so dearly. And they do these funny things too. There's a little bit of like gross out humor. It's as much of it as it is an action or thriller. It's very much a comedy. And they do stuff like, people are eating in his car and like licking their fingers and putting it on the seat. And they give like these big, disgusting close-ups of the food that's like just left over on his seat behind him as he's looking over at it, all pissed off. There's a moment where you think that a cop is going to fuck them in the butt so that they can get away with what they're doing, and it turns out he wants to fuck his car, which you can't quite tell if he's more upset about like not like if it was going to be him or his car. You can't really tell. He's just so in love with it.
There's
I mean,
the tone of this thing, it's absurd, and the tone is incredibly vulgar in terms of like it's very juvenile in a way that I think will be maybe hit or miss for people. Sure, but I found it like the energy with which it's directed, I thought made it quite a bit more convincing, because like the way that you just follow, as Jamie was kind of laying out, like his thought process, like the way that he'll think about, he's about to change gears, or he's about to turn his blinkers on, or he's going to look in his mirror to see what's behind him. Like the camera is constantly feels like it's like whip panning, or like from the point of view of his mirrors, or, the trunk or the rear view camera. I love when he goes in reverse and it's just like an action movie from the perspective of his actual rear view camera, or like there's POV shots of like the bullet holes in his car when he starts getting shot at certain points. And it's kind of like, imagine the situation he finds himself in. Like imagine the opening scene of Winding Refn's Drive, where he's just with these dudes who are like really bad at the heist they're about to do. And it's just the movie is locked into the car as he sits there and waits for them to like, they even do the exact same scene where like they go inside to break in and he hears the alarm go off and he's waiting for them to hurry up. And the same thing happens here where they go in. He drops them off in front of a house where they're about to steal. His cousin and his weird Hitler mustachioed friend are going to break into a house and steal a bunch of like basically designer drugs and make their way out with them. But it goes, the sense of humor that the movie has is like he's out there watching to watch guard. Yeah. And then he doesn't pay attention because he's so obsessed with, like the orientation of his car and how it looks. And he's distracted dressing up his car a little bit in the other seat, while literally the drug dealers come home and start like taking shots at his brother, and he has to drive away and everything like that. But it's just, for me, it's just the level of detail that it's filled with in like the weirdo personalities of like the guy who, his cousin, for example, like just having his flip flops out the window of his car while smoking a joint in his car,
Being
and then
like
saying,
a SoundCloud rapper.
yeah, and he has like a USB drive that's a penis that he plugs into his car so that he can freestyle rap, and his rap is just the worst.
Yeah,
he's
so
like,
aggressive.
I'm a clean condom and you're a dirty tampon and I'll fuck your dad and your mom. Like, these are the lyrics to his song.
Yeah, and it's like aggressively presented. Like he's just yelling essentially the entire time. And I don't know, you put a heavy bass trap beat behind that, and it probably might even bump in the whip. But it's just it would need a good producer, But it's unpurposely obnoxious. And it is for the entire runtime until maybe they get to a little bit of that like familial stuff. Like he has a step. I don't know if it's his daughter or if it's his stepdaughter, but
I think it's his daughter. Yeah.
Okay, and they seem to be kind of like, I don't know, they seem to have a closeness, but he's concerned about things maybe he shouldn't be concerned about, and it kind of gets them into trouble, and more specifically his daughter.
Well, I mean, like the girlfriend or wife is like very clearly, she's like, I want a husband who has like a real job and isn't involved in all of this like weird, wacky bullshit that your criminal cousin gets up to and everything like that. So he begins the movie like trying to be like, I'm not going to get involved with that stuff anymore. And the cousin just says, hey, just, I have one little thing I got to do. Just like drop me off here and watch, and we'll drive away. And then obviously every single possible thing that could go wrong goes wrong for him, and it just turns into like the worst day imaginable. And it is just a series of logistics of how can he stay in this car and also deal with the fact that he has drug dealers chasing him and shooting at him and trying to kill him, while he's also late to like pick up his daughter from school, like almost Bad Lieutenant style. And also he's also Bad Lieutenant style. He's placing bets on the fight that he's listening to on the radio, and
he does like not have the money for it, to the point where even the betting guy is just like, I know you don't have the money, and he insists, and he's just like, all right, it's your funeral, and just signs him up anyway. So he definitely has a past of failure.
Yeah. So I was just pretty impressed that they did, for the most part. I think it kind of falters a little bit at the very, very end, where you can kind of feel it running out of situations to put him through.
Sure.
And also having to wrap up like the stuff with like the drug dealers eventually kidnap his daughter. And that becomes the motivating factor for most of the second half of the film, is just get the drugs back from his cousin and get them back to the dealers so that he can get his daughter returned to him. Which obviously they find ways to complicate in some cool action scenes. Like, for example, the most dangerous looking set piece, in my opinion, is that one where he has to drive in the underground tunnel after the kids, and it's like filled with people. Yeah. Like he's clearly just really driving through like a crowded, civilian area, and the sound design of, like his cousin yelling at him and him listening to the Eurodance music and the radio playing the advertisement for the fights, and, him getting phone calls from his girlfriend about where the daughter is, even though he knows that she's been kidnapped by dangerous drug dealers, and then just getting into honking match and screaming matches with the fucking civilians on the streets and stuff, while literally like driving through crowds of people. Like it gets very, very layered and complicated in terms of what's physically happening in a pretty cool way, and mean, obviously, as well. Like that, some of the humor, again, it'll be hit or miss with people, but man, that there's just no reason to include that shot. For example, when the cop fucks the car and he's licking it up and down, he's jacking off the wipers,
he lubes
and he
up the exhaust pipe.
Dude, he fucks his tailpipe, and there is literally a POV shot inside the tailpipe of like the semen dripping. It reminded me of the bit in The Counselor where Cameron Diaz fucks Javier Bardem's car.
That's exactly what I thought of. Yeah. Not that is like a sexy scene, but this is even far less sexier. So also it even goes into some like, I don't know, surreal fantasy kind of things too. Like the two parts that
Are you talking about the animated part of it?
Yeah, where it's almost well, maybe that's what I'm talking about. It's the part where they're driving and it's kind of like it almost goes into this like psychedelic trance. The music is going. You can only see the lights.
Yeah, no, that part's cool.
Yeah. And then there's also the part with the wolf or the dog that just seems like so random and surreal. And then you get this giant fucking like mass of blood
gore
when they
gag.
explode it.
Yeah,
it's just like. It takes a lot of weird turns, but somehow I think it's just because the energy is so like high the entire time, and it's not afraid to be as silly as it wants to be. That you kind of just buy into all of its absurdity.
That's where I think
depend on the person watching it, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that's just where I think also locking into the car was probably like the right move on some of this stuff, because it means that he can do crazy stuff without having to, expand his budget to show all of it to you. Mm-hmm. You just you get moments where like the guy is in the backseat of the car and he's been shot in the face and they start poking his bullet hole in his face and it just starts like leaking blood everywhere, and there's literally kids in the car at the intersection next to them just screaming, watching this dude just leak blood everywhere. And then the next step is, well, we can't like carry this guy around with us. Let's put his corpse in just like a shipping container. And then they have to then that's when the cop says, you guys are trespassing and I'm not going to let you leave till you let me fuck the car. And then they have to go back to it to go get the corpse, because the drug dealers are like, I want all three of you who fucked us over to come. And they were like, okay, well, you shot one of us. And they go back to that shipping container. And there is, a wolf has like half eaten that dude's corpse, and they go, oh, well, that's not good. And then the wolf is like on top of the car and they're like freaking out. And during the crazy dangerous scene where they hunt down these dudes with the backpacks and they're driving through the pedestrian areas at like pretty high speeds. And even at one point going into, one of those shipping elevators, like to get to like an underground tunnel, like with the car and like people on the hood of the car, like just nuts. They find just randomly, this speaks to the quality of this film in general, they just find a grenade in the kid's backpack. And they were just like, you just know that, okay, they've introduced a grenade for a reason. And so the cousin feeds the grenade to the wolf, and it just explodes chunks all over the right side of his car. And his car just gets fucking destroyed. It gets charred up. It gets ripped. It gets covered in blood. Everything that could go wrong with his car goes wrong.
I did like that it starts, like I was saying, with just as simple as, someone wiping food on the seat to the end of the movie, which is just
and that already annoyed him.
Yeah. So I did like that progression as well. And the ending I don't think is bad. It's very conventional, and I kind of knew exactly what was going to happen from there. It was the type of movie that I don't think would really suit a miserable ending. I feel like that would kind of be out of left field if it did, but it just kind of results in something that you've kind of seen before with him and his daughter are trapped and they are put into a lake and they're sinking, and then he lets her escape, and then he has this like one last epiphany of I'm gonna fight and figure this out, and gets released and he's okay and the whole family's good to go. But it suits the rest of the film's tone. I do feel like if he just fucking died down there looking at the other skeleton people in their cars, it would be a little bit too morbid. But
that was a good touch. Like I like that, like the whole finale where he and his cousin have to drive up and like return all the drugs, and they know that something's going to go wrong, and that there is like kind of like a bit of a fatalism to them going up to this deal. And that's the part where Jamie was talking about, where there's like these neon lightning striking as they drive through a void, and the brother is just like dancing and doing his thing, basically seemingly not knowing that he's about to get shot. And even when he does get shot, there's like this pretty dramatic moment where he like shoots a flare up into the air, and it's meant to kind of have this, sort of existential emotional quality to it. And I don't know that necessarily registered for me, just because of how I guess kind of quick and disorienting and silly the rest of the film is, that I just couldn't, as quickly as the film wanted me to, I wasn't sure I immediately bought into how much he cares about his cousin in that moment. I was like, dude, this cousin just like fucked your life up.
Yeah.
But the it does have a little solid thing where, they have to find a way to do this drug deal scene where he's still stuck in the car and they're going to kill him. So they literally just push the car off the boat and, have him go down there. And the little detail that they've clearly done it before and they've drowned someone else down there and there's just a car with a skeleton in it. That's a nice little touch. And yeah, overall, this is like a pretty funny and vulgar and, to the point, trapped in a car heist thriller. And if you can get on it on that level, it's 80 minutes and it consistently finds ways to be inventive and destructive and, pretty visually and sonically busy. Like the way, just the amount of color and the way that the camera moves and the soundscape of it specifically, just always listening to the radio and the calls and the honking and, it moves. And I will say I did get quite a bit out of like the trance club soundtrack that it kind of has. It definitely felt like it kept the movie moving as well. So this was like a pretty solid 3 for me, I think.
Yeah, me too. It was like a mix between Lock and Crank or something like that.
Crank is actually a good comparison. I didn't even think of that, but Crank is surprisingly similar.
Yeah. So if you like those movies, you'll probably like this. It is obnoxious, but I think in a good way. So and it has some pretty dangerous looking driving going on in it in a couple parts that I enjoyed. So definitely check it out. But moving on here, we are going to start next year with The LAIR, the new British horror film from Neil Marshall. And I don't know where to start with this. Maybe we start with Neil Marshall. I'm assuming, sure, me, Jamie, you have a pretty good track record with Neil Marshall for the most part. I've only seen, I think I've only seen 2 other movies from him, but I did really like them. Like I love The Descent. I think The Descent is a fantastic
Descent is awesome.
Horror movie. Yeah, it's awesome. Everyone should check it out if they haven't. And I kind of like, when was that? 2005. So I was 13 when that came out. So it's been stuck with me for quite a while. And then Dog Soldiers was one I just watched I don't know, a couple years ago, maybe even a year ago. And it's great too. Awesome action, some great effects. He's good at these creature features. And I do prefer him to go like with The Descent. It's almost pure horror. Like there's almost no action in it. There's some here and there just because they're defending themselves at a certain point. But for the most part, you're just watching people in a really dark cave deal with these incredibly horrifying creatures that can't see but can have like hyper hearing. And there's just
they're like bat people pretty much.
There's a lot
the
of
design
suspense.
Of them is really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of really well done suspense, and it's great. And Dog Soldiers is more in line, I guess, with what he's trying to do here, where it's more action oriented and still has like the creatures. It's just that I guess with this one, I don't know if it's budget. I don't know if it was the writing. It seems as if I don't know who dropped the ball on this, but it's not like it's one of these films that I don't think there's a lack of trying here. There's still some like I like the creatures themselves when they get into the underground lair. But maybe we should get into the plot before we get too heavy into that stuff.
Yeah. Well, because I went into this excited for the same reason. Like The Descent, it is just pure gnarly suspense filmmaking, and part of the reason I love that movie is that there's like no reason or explanation for it to make the turn that it does from being a survival movie to a monster movie. Because like the survival movie as is of them going into the dark cave and getting stuck, like that's just, it's a scary movie as is, and the way that he shot it, like it's really well done. It really gets into the claustrophobia and like the really, the dirty texture of being stuck in there and feeling like you're unclean. And then when it decides to make the turn that it does, it is just one of the wettest, filthiest, like bloodiest movies that you'll see of its kind, with just like tearing and puncturing and gushing, and it's a really, really great time. And from what I understand, Dog Soldiers is more similarly premised on like that Aliens or Predator sort of like military monster movie type concept, which definitely this is doing more of. Even his weirdo cannibal virus movie that he did, Doomsday, that movie's
cool.
like pretty inelegant and sloppy, but it has like the concept of it, which is like a mix of Escape from New York and like Resident Evil and like a little bit of Mad Max in there. Like, you know, you can see what he's aiming for, and it does at a certain point have you know, it's gross enough that I get some enjoyment out of it. And even his Hellboy, which I think is bad, there's kind of like this, there's this like R-rated edgelord quality to it that I kind of found entertaining.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And you know, it didn't really work, but it's a weird movie. Definitely weirder than like, you know, like the big battle episodes he was the one doing for like Game of Thrones. But needless to say, apparently he's left all of this behind. He left HBO and he left studio genre filmmaking after he met a actress by the name of Charlotte Kirk. Sorry.
Yeah.
Who, like Paul W.S. Anderson and Mila Jovovich before them, have decided that they are exclusively going to make movies together. She is going to be his muse and his co-writer, and he's basically said in interviews that he only wants to make movies that star her basically forever. Okay. And she is a relatively, from what I could see, like unknown actress who got a couple roles. I think she was in Ocean's 8, apparently. I don't even remember her in that.
She's in Nonstop.
But looking Nonstop, Yep. Looking her up, the only thing I could find were some articles about her extramarital affairs that she had with the heads of Universal and Warner Brothers, which no judgment there, girl, get the bag, you know. But the combination of her and Marshall means that, yeah, it seems like they don't seem like the most inventive collaborators as writers. He's now getting direct-to-video, like B-movie budgets to kind of work with her, and it shows. And I will say, I don't know that she's got the juice. She doesn't seem like she's that compelling of a presence, and she definitely is weirdly clean, was my note for this
film.
Yeah, like just for like considering previous Neil Marshall protagonists who just get covered in dirt and blood and just, you know, like she just doesn't seem like she's willing to do that. She constantly looks like she's a badass pilot who just stepped off of like an H&M ad or something like that. Like she looks perfectly just like made up. Her clothes don't even seem to get dirty. And even in the parts in the movie where she, you know, she has gone deep into the underground cave and seen head explodes around her, she just, you know, they put like a little dab of blood on her forehead and she still looks perfect.
Yeah, this is the type of thing that should be, especially once you see the monsters and just how like strong they are and how kind of like, I don't think it's filmed in the best way, but I think the monsters could be considered kind of scary and all of that. She should just be like absolutely covered in mud, unrecognizable by the end of something like this. And she does kind of keep the whole the model-esque quality of her the entire time, I think. Not to say that there isn't like a few scenes in here where they try to bloody it up and make it kind of gory. Like there's some body explosions and stuff like that. But it just, for me, most of this was the writing. I just found it to be
it's bizarre.
And it's I mean, you can get into the stuff with, are they in Afghanistan, I believe? Yeah. But
they're in Afghanistan, where the U.S. Air Force have apparently previously dropped a MOAB on a remote sort of province there, and as a result, they think that, you know, it's maybe been radioactive or it's unleashed something they didn't quite expect, some sort of beast that has now started killing local Afghan villagers and become something of kind of like a legend, almost like a werewolf to locals, talking about like the Dog Soldiers connection. And He also is definitely going for, you can tell because he opens with the John Carpenter font, which I was like, I don't know about that choice, dude. But you could tell that he's going a little bit for something like The Thing as well.
Yeah.
Just with the Arctic replaced with Afghanistan. There's even actually like a big shot at one point of them looking at an alien craft with like that same wide shot. And there's like there's a synth score to it and everything like that. But it's a weird combo where like it's trying to be Aliens or The Thing or Dog Soldiers or The Descent, but then it's also like, I can't tell if it's on purpose or not, but it is also just a really, really silly 80s actioner pastiche, but with like a direct-to-video budget, like, and just the amount of the way that characters talk to each other, the way that they're surrounded by what's like obviously like CG smoke and gunfire and done on like a low budget. It felt really, really silly in ways that in some cases you could tell they were doing it on purpose. And in other times I was like, I don't think that they are.
Yeah, I couldn't tell based on the tone crosses between like serious actioner and like almost military movie to like we're mocking this very thing, but it never finds its own voice. It feels like I just felt like the entire time, anytime that they would do one of those, you know, kind of corny actioner lines from one of the military guys, I would hear the line.
They're so bizarre, dude.
Yeah, I would hear the line and I'd be like, okay, that sounds like you're poking fun, but the delivery and the filmmaking itself is so dry. So you get kind of cross-wired there, and I'm just not totally sure exactly what he was going for by the end. I could not tell if he was trying to make a serious film more in the lines of Descent, just in the sense of tone, or if he was going for, I guess, the Dog Soldiers thing, because I think Dog Soldiers has a little bit of comedy involved in it because of its kind of just ludicrous plot. But yeah, I just don't think he found the balance here whatsoever. I could never tell really what he was going for.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest hang up people are going to have is honestly just going to be the performances.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe also the writing. It's like it's a question of
more than anything. Like I think the performances are not great, obviously, but when I'm listening,
I think
to
the
some
eye
of these
patch
lines,
dude fucking sucks.
Yeah.
The British guy who's like he's like a Battlestar Galactica actor, and he's very clearly trying to do like some like rah like Southern American drill instructor kind of accent.
Yeah.
And every time he delivers a line, I was just like, it's so low rent. And so like, this is like worse acting than you would expect in a direct to video action film. I've actually come to expect more out of my Scott Adkins films than what this guy is delivering as an actor.
Yeah. I think that was part of the mix, I guess, in tone was like, he would be given lines that I would think as an actor, you would just ham up and like kind of lean into the ridiculousness and the silliness of like the premise and the line itself, but he plays it, or at least tries to, like plays it almost completely dry and serious, as if he's like a very serious character doing something that we should I don't know. I don't think he read the tone properly, and it's not like the writing helps. So I would agree. Yeah, it wasn't very good.
Yeah, well, and even the British actors seem like they're doing cartoon like British accents, which I was like, Neil Marshall is British. Like he should know. Like they're like you'll have the American general played by a British guy be like, my life may not be worth blood nickel, but I will hold this position until the last cartridge. and he's delivering this very seriously. And then you'll just dead center, he'll look at like one of the local, British soldiers, and he'll be like, jolly governor, let's go give these monsters some tea. And it's and there's also a guy doing like a Welsh accent, and it's at a certain point, it did become hard to distinguish between what was comedic pastiche or like meant to be like a critique of like people who have done cartoon depictions of soldiers in previous action films or something, or what is just really, really poor writing and acting, which to me did make it a little less scary when those characters are then confronted by these giant monsters who just have like teeth and no eyes and claws, and who do start at a certain point like pretty viciously ripping into, these characters and like peeling their faces off and biting
Yeah.
their jaws off, and like it gets pretty nasty. But I was just sitting there going, man, I have never felt less danger for any characters, because these are all just cartoons.
Yeah, and you really just don't care about the whole unit as a whole. They do have, like you were saying, with some of the violence. There's one in particular that I was shocked that they had in it, just because it looked really good and it was very in your face and violent. Was when the guy gets one of the claws from the monsters like through his face. In the elevator.
Great, dude.
That was awesome.
His face just splits open with a claw coming right through it, and it's full practical. It looks awesome.
Yeah, it looks great. It really does. And I was just like, we needed more of this. I could have honestly dealt with all the bad writing if it just had a bunch of great effects work and was just having fun with that. But it takes the drama of itself a little too seriously. There's a little bit too much in between,
and even some of the
exposition.
effects work gets a little wonky in some parts too.
Yeah, like some,
which I don't usually like to harp on, but it like when you have such good stuff, the other stuff can, like the big explosions don't look good. Some of the times where the movie kind of threatens to go Tremors mode, and it's trying to like up the levels of silliness, and it's ambitious, but it doesn't quite deliver on it. Like, you'll see an incredibly CG, like the creatures have like little venom tongues that like fly out and start like grabbing people's necks and stuff like that, and the shot will just like not look particularly convincing. But then they'll cut to like a close-up of them doing like the practical tongue around someone's neck being pulled on, and like that part will look good. And it's just constantly switching between the two. It's not like particularly integrated, but there are a few moments like fucking when the one army general he grabs the grenades and hurls himself at the monster and blows both his arms off.
Yeah.
The actual like blown off arms effect is done in that like old school kind of like 80s effects way that's kind of charming, and also the actual shot of just like the monster's guts just flying all over the soldiers and stuff, like that stuff's pretty good.
Yeah, totally agree. Those were all the highlights for me, was anytime like the monsters were on screen. And it's not like, the monster design is kind of standard, like you said, no eyes, big teeth, they're growling, they're throwing people around. But they have enough like weight to them, as it's like whoever they got to be in the suits.
Well, it's dudes in rubber
people.
Suits.
Yeah.
So which I kind of appreciate someone, doing that.
Because I'm so tired. Like when you see the CGI on a creature, it's just like it takes it completely out of it. I'd rather a shitty looking guy in a suit than a CGI character half the time, or a creature half the time. And it stays committed to that practical effects work a lot of the time, at least. And I really did respect that. And, that's what Neil Marshall usually does. So those moments, you can tell that he's like really having a good time and being in his zone. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you felt this. I kind of just felt like he was missing like a lot of the intensity that something like The Descent has. Like the way that he shot it, it felt like these kind of like silly, not particularly dynamic like wide shots of the monsters in like big rubber suits like running around, which again I on some level am charmed by, because I just think that's
Especially
I think that's
in like
very
daylight,
silly.
like a daylight tent, and you still have the big monster just in full display. Like I love that. I think that usually it takes balls to do that.
So like I was loosely charmed by the fact that he did that, but as a result, it doesn't, like, the body horror doesn't actually translate to you really being very, I don't know, kind of like creeped out by it. It's just kind of passably kind of goofy, and I think some people will get some entertainment out of that. And I do think that in the actual physical violence that it's there, for me it's just when it switched back to the characters also treating the situation like it was silly. I didn't get much out of that. Like the one guy pulling up the bat and being like, "Batter up, you son of a bitch," and it's like Planet Terror stuff. It's the kind of stuff I don't really like about that, where it's like intentionally quote unquote bad. And yeah, like that stuff didn't work for me, especially too when they're delivering like very serious lines later where they're like,
Right.
are you telling me that the entire Russian invasion of Afghanistan was a smokescreen and it was all a rabbit hole just to investigate these extraterrestrial aliens? That's fucking huge, dude. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have the big slow-mo overlit hero shot and the low angle like push in on like all of them like walking up to be like, you know, the monsters have so far been attacking us and we've been scared of them. Now it's time for us to go to their home. And it's like this huge hero push in. It's like fake movie levels of exaggerated. And then you have the guy be like, ladies and gentlemen, let's boogie. And then you have the Welsh guy be like, you jammy twat. I wish I said that.
Yeah.
That's so cool that you said that. And
yeah, being almost like way too self-aware in that sense too. And that's the thing. It's like, it's strange that it's clearly in a lot of moments self-aware. It even ends with like a joke where they're like, they have the car and they're like, it's doing this big zoom out of the camera as they're all just making jokes about how the car won't start and they have to start it again. And then they eventually it does start and they go off or whatever. It felt in that moment like I should have previously been watching a very silly and over the top action film, and it just never quite gets there, and it never gets
it never feels like it intentionally has that tone. It doesn't feel like it was, and part of the reason is that it's not replicating the actual, I don't know, like cheaper grindhouse style of the kind of film it's trying to be.
Oh yeah,
like it just looks like a low rent direct to video movie. So as a result, like the whole, like I think that's the main kicker, is that I feel like these cartoon performances and the kind of tone it wants to have could translate better if it actually looked like the kind of movies that it's referencing or it's trying to be, and it just doesn't. It looks like cheap garbage a lot of the time. Even though they've clearly put some work into the effects and, you know, even the set, like the actual like final set piece that takes place in the bunker. I don't mind like the wide angle, sort of like neon glow stick lit tracking shots of them getting pursued by the creatures and stuff like that. But, you know, it's just it's one of those things where, yeah, it feels like, I don't know if Leo Marshall has kind of lost something, or if this is just we've lost something in the way that movies get made, even since the mid 2000s, where this just would have, you know, the default would have been that this was shot on film and that he couldn't rely on very much CG. And I don't know if that's what's happening or if who fucking knows. But I will say the finale of this, other than the gore, it pretty much I did nothing for me for the most part, of like them going down and like confronting the monsters. And it's meant to be pretty tense, and it's like doing this bizarre thing where like the Afghan insurgents are also making their way into the bunker at the same time as the monsters. And there's this bizarre bit where it like cross cuts between one guy fighting off an insurgent who's about to like try to shoot a beheading video of him while they're cross cutting between the monsters, who then they kind of hint are Afghan people who have been experimented on. Yeah, and it's weird too, because like there's a weird racial element to that I think people might be a little turned off by. I think it's mostly just a thoughtless thing that they did by accident, but it is weird. Yeah, because I think like because they have that character that eventually like tells them, you know, I joined the group because I had to, because they were going to hurt my family if I didn't. It helps with defense. It helps with all that. So they kind of like humanize one of the characters there, one of the Afghanistan civilians. But it just, because they're doing that cross cutting between the monsters and them, it feels like there's a lack of I guess sympathy or empathy for the group, even though they have one of the members legitimately telling them a lot of these people are in it for their own protection. And so it just kind of, and I don't think it's on purpose and again, these extraterrestrials like kidnapped them and experimented on them. Like they were clearly the victims of this thing first, you know, in like that quality as well. Between like killing the monsters and then killing them as well, it gives you a weird
message that I don't think was intentional. I really don't. It didn't cross like that. For me, it was just like, he needs more action in this finale, so we're just going to have like the whole fight go on. But
it was very clearly he shot two different set pieces, and I don't even know that they were intended to be cross cut or anything like that. And but again, that just leads to the inelegance of the whole thing and why it feels again just so, I don't know, reductive and generic. And it feels like one of those things where, again, he's making a thing that has it's another thing you can't tell if that's meant to be another like 80s pastiche. He's critiquing the kind of like Afghanistan action films of the era, or if it's just bad filmmaking. And ultimately it's up to you watching it.
Yeah, exactly. For us, unfortunately, it was bad filmmaking, but I don't know. I like Marshall. I hope he gets back on track. From the sounds of it, it doesn't look like he will for a little while, if he's just going to work with his wife and this is the kind of stuff that they're going to make. But I don't know.
He is going to make her a movie star. It's coming. Yeah, I feel it.
If he's going to do it successfully, I feel like he really needs to lean in to the ridiculous aspects of it, the practical effects that he's very good at, and just, I don't know. This felt so oddly serious for what happens in the movie and the type of dialogue that we're doing. And maybe it's just because it's so like dryly made and the filming is the lighting is very flat. I really don't know exactly why the tone is so strange in this, but I just think he needs to go back to having more fun with it and leaning into the ridiculousness, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just that they had one approach where they were.
I'm sorry, but I get you're in love, man. That's fine, but I don't know. It might be detrimental to your filmmaking. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they wrote something incredibly generic and they tried to pass it off as we are making our version of like an 80s silly action movie riff. But as a filmmaker, he's much better at like genuinely tense monster movie filmmaking. Yeah. And those two things for me just did not end up cohering in any way. And especially not at this budget level and at this point in his filmmaking career, which I don't know if it's just the resources or if it's a laziness, not really sure. But
his own personal decisions, I don't know.
Bizarre decisions being made that we don't know who to associate to, but I will say, if you just want to see at least for like a half hour of the movie, I'd say just some dudes in rubber suits tearing soldiers apart.
Yeah,
you do get a little bit of that. Some of it looks wonky, some of it looks good.
Yeah, but it's definitely when I'm thinking back on the movie, those are the moments that I remember. I don't remember like a damn thing about the exposition or any time that they're sitting down talking to one another. I could not give a fuck less.
You didn't love the half dirty dozen as they described themselves?
Yeah, no. Yeah, the reference didn't even
all
pop
their
in my
backstories.
Head. Like anytime I was excited anytime the monsters came up because I knew at least that would be fun to watch. So that's really, if you're going to watch the movie, I think that would be the reason. But if anything, if you're only going to stick to one Neil Marshall film, I would suggest The Descent. And if not that, Dog Soldiers.
Yeah. Well, just also consider the fact that The Descent is also like a dudes in rubber suit monster movie. And like that is, I think, genuinely a suspenseful, scary film.
And they even technically have less like in your face about it. Like, they have the kind of the creepiness of their design. And I think they do like a little bit of a scream here and there. But for the most part, you're just watching people in a cave and they don't have weapons besides like maybe the pickaxe or something that they have. So he even has less to work with to make it exciting. And it's just far more thrilling than anything in this. So I don't know what happened, but I hope he gets back on track because I do think there's still the thing is that you can see what he's good at in this film still. It's just everything else that's kind of weighing it down a little bit.
Yeah, and very, very generic and flat and clean looking.
Yeah, way too clean looking
for a filmmaker that I would otherwise say has like a pretty like again, the Descent, like that movie, when that girl gets out of that cave and it's like she's back in like daylight and grass, or like anything like that, you're like, holy shit, I have not seen what sky looks like. I have not seen what a non-dirt blood covered surface looks like for like an hour.
That's a good point. That
like
feeling should be similar to when we're like in this underground facility with all these monsters, but I think that's also a detriment, is that it cuts back to outside so often as well. You should almost be trapped in this laboratory for a little while.
Maybe he just bit off a little too much. He got a little ambitious with the scale of the set pieces that he could pull off.
Yeah, that might be it too. So yeah, for now it's a 2 out of 5.
Same here.
But I'll still watch the next one he comes out with. I hope he makes another movie I enjoy.
Yeah, let's see what him and Charlotte can cook up in the meantime.
Yeah. Exactly.
Apparently they did another one. Someone I commented on my review saying that if you wanted to see a movie about like witch hunts and the Great Plague and a woman whose makeup never looks anything less than pristine while she is tortured for weeks on end, that's the movie to watch apparently. So this might just be an issue with him. Yeah.
He's like, my wife's too pretty. I can't do it, guys. You can't put the dirt
I'm trying
on
to
her.
imagine like The Devils, but it stars like an Instagram model. Like that would be pretty cool.
Man.
Thank you, Neil. But the last feature before we move on into the shorts that we're going to be talking about is a pretty cool little one called Evil Eye. And it is a Mexican horror film directed by one Isaac Esban. And yeah, it has this really cool, like ancient folklore, fairy tale, children's film quality, where it is kind of loosely about these two girls, one named Nala and one named, why am I blanking on the other child's name? Luna, I believe.
Yeah.
And they are spending some time with her grandmother in the countryside because her little sister Luna is very mysteriously ill, and they can't seem to figure out what's wrong with her and why other children also in the building keep getting sick. So they go to hang out with Granny so that they can go have some place to stay while the parents go investigate some, experimental medical treatment for Luna to figure out what it is that's happening to her. But essentially,
very experimental.
Yes, the sickness seems to be kind of draining her very slowly of life. She's getting pale. She's looking bloodless, and it sort of entwines with this very loose sort of children's bedtime spooky story about these triplet sisters who were all haunted by an evil witch, and witches in this suck the children's blood to stay young forever. Mm-hmm. And they kind of get like a little bit of a backstory that involves like a sorceress and some dark magic egg rituals and like little baby creatures called like bacchas. And there is this whole kind of folklore, old gothic vibe to the whole thing that definitely I think helps it a lot, because the little girls are coming from the city where they have phones, and there's this kind of like this modern sort of like domestic drama quality to it. And then as soon as they hit Granny's house, it becomes like a really, really dark Hansel and Gretel ass kind of movie.
Yeah. And like the whole house, like you said, it's very gothic, very old school, giant mansion haunted house. It looks like it's kind of almost been barely cleaned up, like, the cobwebs in the corner kind of thing. And it's all old, like, I don't know if it's Victorian, but like old architecture and everything like that. And as soon as she walks
drenched in a layer of like mustard fog.
Yeah, exactly. And it, like, as soon as she walks in, the grandma is completely unaware of what Wi-Fi even is. So, she's pretty much forced to engage with this environment and her newfound family. Because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they've really met the grandmother beforehand.
No.
Yeah, so this is all new to them.
It's suggested there's like a bit of a family history that, like the mother maybe didn't necessarily introduce them to her because she's a bit of she's an outcast. She doesn't really leave her house. The grandma looks like, in terms of the way that she's dressed, like she's like just walked out of like an Elizabeth Battery painting,
right,
or something. Like she's got like these like very old dresses on, and she has like these big fancy hats and the sunglasses.
Yeah, it's like
and
the
she's
house
basically
has made her become like stuck in time, essentially.
Yeah. And she's basically just as like sickly and wet and splotchy as like the house kind of looks, and how like decrepit and like not cleaned it is and everything like that. And yeah, they essentially get left home with the grandma, who they start to they're not sure whether the bedtime story has freaked them out or whether the granny is like essentially like an old witch from Suspiria.
Right.
They don't, they at most of the movie, I'd say in the middle section is like the older sister Nala, like kind of trying to figure that out. Like, is this place just giving me bad vibes because of all like the chipped wallpaper and like gramophones and like dusty carpets and the antique frames and everything like that, and how just like decayed everything looks?
And also, I guess how the grandmother treats her. She's very like old school,
very
almost
stern,
conservative in a sense. Like there's that one moment where she has her bathing suit on and she like tells her to cover up and says like, you don't want to look like a whore and all that kind of stuff. Right. So she's definitely not a very open-minded or progressive grandmother in that sense. And so, yeah, she starts to feel a little bit restrained and kind of just scared of the new environment and the fact that, you know, her parents have left her. So she really has nowhere to go. She's 13 and her sister is like 8 or 9 or something like that. So, I mean, like they have nowhere to go. They have to stay here and just kind of force themselves into the lack of comfort that they have now. And so, yeah, I think like there's a lot of, excuse me, there's a lot of fake outs with the dream sequences. At a certain point,
that was my main note too. There's a few too many. I don't like when if a movie can craft one well, I think that I can visually get into them. Yeah. But as soon as you pull like your third or fourth one in a row, I'm kind of like, okay, no. We need to see like what's happening.
What is happening? Yeah, absolutely. And I guess by the end, in a sense, like it kind of tells you that a lot of these, maybe even half the dream sequences could have been reality
actually happening. Yeah.
It's just that when you are watching it for the first time, by the third or fourth one, you're like, holy shit, like are we gonna get some type of answer or some real progression? Because it kind of just feels like it stalls a lot because of that. And what I will say though is I really like the way he uses the camera. They do a lot of these awesome, very uncomfortable close-ups of Nala, especially when she's feeling anxious or kind of trapped. And they're like uncomfortably close up to the point where it just feels like she has nowhere else to go. And I did really like all of the strange kind of like Dutch angles that he was using and the severe close-ups. I thought that those were very, very effective. And then when it gets into,
I also like the effects work, dude.
Yeah,
like when they eventually hear like this the scary bedtime story about, you know, the sorceress and the witches, and they do like he commits to like a very old school depiction of supernatural witchcraft in a way that I thought was really, really cool, which was like, you know, like all the little kids go up to like the witch's hut, and the witch actually like wears this young woman's skin and she keeps it fresh by keeping it inside of like a pumpkin. So you're literally like the kids are like opening up a pumpkin, and inside they're like pulling out a skin suit, like almost like Hellraiser style or something. And the witch like looks like, you know, she's like a skinless person, and she looks more convincingly, I think, like the weird bat creatures from The Descent than the new Neil Marshall film does.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, because like when they go into like when Nala starts to have those dream sequences and she's seeing Luna get sucked, the blood's being sucked from her by one of those monsters, or I guess by the end it's like the witch, but she's like completely naked but doesn't have like any discernible real like body parts in her lower body. It's just like she almost looks like a severely burned person,
right?
And but there's like there's a wetness to the quality of the design that I always appreciate. We talk about that a lot. I mean, if it's just like goopy and kind of gross looking, I just think it's so much more effective. and just looks more real. Like it's not so
and
dry on screen.
And speaking of like a clashing tone, I think like contributing to a film, like the fact that it does like a gory supernatural horror thing that feels kind of out of pace with the rest of the film. I found that, unlike with the LAIR, I found this like actually it made it scarier because like the children's fairy tale stuff feels almost innocent and it feels kind of sweet and kind of cute, and the way that it's been designed. Yeah. And then when you throw in this like legitimately creepy, gory and stuff that honestly still reads as silly at times. Like there's a part where she's like having dreams about pots of boiling green goopy soup that like the witches are making, or like a part that almost feels like out of a fairy tale where she's arming herself with like these oversized shears. Yeah, like it's trading just as much in like sort of images that come to mind when you think of like an old, children's fairy tale of them being stuck living in a house with a witch who is pretending to be their grandma or something like that. Yep. Like it has all of that sort of goofy children stuff in there. But then it just, by taking it to these like actually gruesome, effects heavy kind of genre extremes, like it actually, to me, it made it feel more dangerous and more scary as they, when it went back to the children's stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. It kind of reminded me of the tone in Pan's Labyrinth a little bit, where it's kind of it's very much like you're leaning into the fairy tale aspect, but then as you go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, it just gets darker and darker, and the adult world is essentially shown to them.
And I was gonna say, like, speaking of another film that does the fairy tale as like a wake up to like the real world that's happening outside, that it's like the adult world is more complicated and disturbing than you could ever anticipate.
It initially presents itself as just like, oh, she's got a crush on the pool boy, I'm gonna get in my bikini and try to go in front of him and be like, oh, I'm cute, aren't I cute, that kind of thing. And then it just turns into like family sacrifices and just realizing that
ritualistic violent sex scenes with that almost reminded me of the Innocents, when the maid and the groundskeeper have like a relation, like a hardcore rough sex relationship with each other that starts they think infecting the kids, right?
Yep. And then they have like you were just mentioning that ritual kind of around the campfire in the woods that she discovers, and they like sacrifice themselves to do it right in front of her, and eventually there's this one, and she
slices her own throats in front of her, dude. Like it's gruesome, like it's violent. This film,
and like we said, it leads up to all of this, so it does feel in like the first 45 minutes like it's more of a children's fairy tale. It's still horror, but more in line
haunted
with the children's perspective, and then it just gets so much worse and adult and violent, and I think it really suits it well. Like one shot, this is just more of a gross out shot for me, but the one shot they have a close up of the grandmother or the witch's mouth as she's drinking. The children's
Luna's blood, right?
And it's just unbelievably
she's
thick
just slurping it up,
and it's disgusting. Like it's an unnecessary way of drinking anything, and they have it just the camera right up like side profile.
I wish I could have drank anything and felt as euphoric as that grandma was feeling drinking that blood.
She's like tongue fucking the glass. It's fucking wild. So yeah, stuff like that I think was great, and then the I thought the ending was I was expecting kind of a dark twist, but what I wasn't expecting was it to be as cruel as it was.
I was definitely expecting there to be like the parents come home and they find out that the granny has been a witch and has been genuinely draining the little sister of blood, including whipping her around on a wheelchair with like literal like blood sample / transfusion tools. Yeah. And she's like, okay, well at this point you're very clearly just, you're not just like biting into her leg. You have like a machine to get this blood out of her at this point, because she wants to become, the grandma is the witch from the story. She wants to be a young a young woman.
Yeah.
And yeah, the big sort of like twist after the, scenes where they go into the woods and there's like these rituals and tribal dancing and masks and fires and, characters sacrificing and bathing in blood and humping the air and giant eggs and the red gel lighting. Like it gets pretty stylistically out there.
Yeah.
And the grandma eventually does become super young and is revealed to be her mother's twin sister or triplet sister, and that they are the original children from the story who became witches. And the eventual twist that when the mother goes back in, she trades places with her, and she puts all the bandages on that the grandma was wearing on the mother, and now she looks young and looks exactly like the mother, played by the same actress. And
she makes out and fucks the husband right in front of everybody, basically.
Yes. Yeah. And the house is like crumbling, and just having Nala go back upstairs to go and kill what she thinks is her witch of a grandmother. And what has instead happened is that the grandma has become her mother and become young and put her mom in her place. And we just watch the daughter kill her own mom, like not knowing that it's her mom. And pretty graphically, like with the shears, like she starts
blood's everywhere,
stabbing the shit out of her gut and her side. And then once again, because witches don't like salt, she covers her in salt. And burns her to death.
Yeah, and it's also played as this moment of like real triumph in a sense for Nala, because she makes the conscious decision to like go back and be like, I'm gonna get rid of this witch. Like I'm going to kill her, and I'm gonna be. It's almost like a thing where it's like she's becoming more adult. She's growing up and she's making this really difficult decision, but she's ultimately destroying the evil or the curse or whatever. And and the spin is that she absolutely has not. She's just killed the mother that, granted, she
has killed a witch, but her mother, it turns out, was also a witch and was probably the nicer witch of the two.
It seemed like her mother was actually trying to help her children, right? Whereas the grandmother was just trying to, or whatever it was at this point, the grandmother was just trying to live on and stay youthful, and the classic witch move. But I was not expecting the cruelty at the end of the film, and they just kind of do this thing where it's like the weird looking creature or grandma or what's left while she's not in her pristine form just kind of like hugs her, and they do this zoom out of the apartment, and it just goes to the whole city, and you're just kind of left with that.
The old ways have made their way into the city now, and they're like and like, who knows what kind of happens from there. It's very bleak, actually.
It is. It's very bleak, because it just ends, and it's just like something like you were tricked into killing your own mother, and then it's like done. You're like, holy shit.
Which, so to be fair, too, and what's cool about that is that does feel truthful to like those old, really dark fairy tales.
Absolutely. Like all of those end morbidly. Almost all of them.
Yes. So it feels like he made the right call in terms of where he decided to take this. And so like that totally made up for the kind of early and middle sections where I thought, okay, we're getting a little too cutesy with the fairy tale haunted house being a metaphor for, like this girl coming into womanhood. And I was being like, okay, I really hope there is more to this. And like there was.
Yeah, there absolutely is. He had plenty of
slimy, it gets goopy, it gets weirdly horny and ritualistic and violent. And I was like, okay, I will absolutely take whatever the hell is going on with this like Mexican folklore monster movie, witch movie. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, this was a
solid 3.
Yeah, solid 3. I really did enjoy it, especially by the last like half an hour. And I plan on checking out another couple of these guys' films. Actually, it's he's got 2. One's called The Similars and one's called The Incident, and they both have pretty good ratings. So I'm gonna make sure I check them out, because I did like his style, and he's got some good ideas. So yeah, solid.
Hell yeah. Check them out. that will wrap it up for the features that we saw at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. But before we wrap up here, because we didn't get to, we were kind of hoping to see like 4 or 5 movies, and we didn't get quite that much of a chance.
Yeah.
So we thought that we would kind of give a shout out to a couple short films that we checked out, which I don't know if these are going to become available online for people at some point. They probably they might. So keep your eyes out if you're interested at all in genre short films. But I figured Jamie and I will probably just go back and forth and maybe name a couple short films that we saw that we wanted to highlight.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the same ones for the most part. So
yeah, we tried to watch everything that played in the pre-feature short film list, and I also branched out and watched a couple other ones. So we'll see which ones that you would like to name. But Jamie, what was the first short film that you saw that kind of stood out for you?
It was actually one that you suggested and said that it was good. Was Cruise, which was just this it's like 6 minutes long. Essentially, you open up with a guy in kind of like this office space with a man sitting across from him, and he's trying to convince somebody to take a free cruise on the telephone, kind of like teleprompter style. And he fails to do so, and he immediately gets shot in the head. So you kind of have that premise in the first minute, and then the second guy comes in, and he essentially has the same task and knows exactly what the consequences seem to be.
Yes. And they have 3 tries. There's like a little clock in the corner that's telling them.
Yeah, and it clicks down every single time they fail. And that does include even if there's like a hang up of the phone and it was unintentional or anything like that. And it almost sounds like it would be more of like a suspense thing, but they play it as a comedy thing for the most part.
Yeah. It feels like a workplace satire type thing, like I think like Office Space or something like that. But it's like the most
like don't fail to meet your quota, you son
like
of a bitch.
like gruesome contraption telemarketing campaign where it's like, you know, like I do like the bald man in the leather coat. My favorite part was the tense moment where the guy actually does get the guy on the line to take it, but he loses service.
Yeah.
And so as a result, he hangs up, but the guy's like, well, the guy was gonna take it, and then he uses caller ID to call back.
Right.
And the great little tense moment they came up with is the one where he's like, am I allowed to like answer it?
Right.
Like, and the bald guy has to go over, put his gun down and go over to the dusty rule books to be like, while the phone is ringing, and be like, okay, is it okay for this guy to answer the phone? Is this and he's like, okay, I guess it is.
Yeah. And I think it's funny too, because he doesn't say anything, I don't think, the entire time. The guy that's holding the gun, and he plays it very much like this is just his day job, and it's just he's gotten used to what he has to do day in and day out. So it's very just like flatly delivered, and he's just looking at the rule book like it's just his job every day, and he's just like, oh yeah, I guess it is in there. Okay, go ahead, answer the phone. And I loved how dryly it was delivered in that sense. I loved the like kind of comedic panic that the other guy was doing as he was trying to convince people to take the cruise. I just had a really good time with it. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah.
And
6 minutes, and it has a good sense of humor, and it has a funny little, like one room claustrophobic horror concept, like mixed with like a workplace comedy type thing.
And at the end, I think he actually succeeds, and it ends up that he gets the free cruise or something like that.
Yes.
Which is very funny. I had a good time with this one. I gave it a 3.
Yeah, and that one, I figured just because these are short films, and we should give a shout out to that one was directed by Sam Rudikoff. So we're gonna be shining some light today. So thanks to Sam. That was a cool little short film.
Yes, agreed.
The next one for me, one of the main ones that really stood out, because I ended up watching, I think like 8 or 9. I saw a couple. Mm-hmm. This was one that I thought this one was the funniest one in a really bleak way. It was called Horse Brothers. And it was directed by Milos Mitrovic and Fabian Valesco, and it's an 8-minute short. It was shot on 16 millimeter. It has a really it has like the 4:3 aspect ratio, and it is a Winnipeg horror comedy, essentially about two brothers who live on a farm together, and they are selling like old tech devices like iPhones and laptops, and like essentially they've given up on farming as their way of making money, and they just kind of live off these selling these old devices. But it turns out that one of the brothers ends up trading some of it for just like batteries instead of money. And he might be like skimping on his part of the work and the profit. And so as a result, these two brothers are kind of going a little bit crazy because, and also they have a horse. This is a good, an important note. They are the Horse Brothers, and the horse is voiced by the very well-known Canadian art house filmmaker Guy Maddin, who did films like The Forbidden Room and My Winnipeg, and he speaks basically via voiceover, but also like silent era title cards. It's a very strangely designed little movie where one brother kills the other brother and steals the horse, and that's basically the whole premise of the 8 minutes. But it's gorgeously shot. I thought the way that it was like expressively lit and grainy, it reminded me of like almost like Italian horror at times.
Yeah.
It has these really crazy, weird, abstract close-ups, hilarious Canadian hick accents for people who are fans of that, like the Fubar.
Oh yeah, fuck. One of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, man. Like, so if you like that kind of stuff, think of like Fubar characters being like, "Hey, buddy." But they are stuck in some genuinely what is like nightmarish and kind of psychedelic imagery. And it also ends on a fucking hilarious gag where the horse whips out a pistol and shoots one of the brothers in the head, which I was not expecting at all.
One of my, honestly, like I did like this. So it was kind of still in the like strong three territory for me. But when that horse shot was unbelievably funny. One of my favorite shots of this year, to be honest.
You just don't expect it.
No, exactly. Because what the shot is for everybody is it's like this wide shot where you're kind of far away from them while they're in the canoe in the middle of the lake or ocean. And you see the brother sitting up, and you see the horse on the other side just standing up, and one of the horse's legs just extends with a gun in hand and then shoots the brother and then goes back down so he's on all fours again. And it's just something I've like obviously never seen before, and it was hilarious. Like I laughed pretty hard, so I loved that. And I also loved, like you were mentioning, the psychedelic nature of it sometimes, where the one brother like busts into the room and starts screaming at the top of his lungs, and like everything goes blurry, and he won't stop with the like scream face, and then it kind of it starts
the horse head pops up in the bed, and it almost looks like they're doing like a comedy version of the shot from The Godfather where the guy wakes up in bed with the horse head in bed with him.
Yeah, and then but at the same time it flashes in the bed and then disappears, so it has this like surreal dreamlike element to it, and it even ends after the initial brother was killed, with him looking at the brother getting shot by the horse in the house still. So it's a very strange movie, but I found they found a good tone between the like kind of surreal elements and the comedy aspect of it. I was on board for most of its for most of the ideas. I did think a little bit of the look, like I get what they were going for, but I felt it to be a little bit over the top with its design. But I did still really like it, and once you see the whole thing in its context, it kind of suits what they're doing. So, I had a good time with this one. I read it as well.
Yeah,
and that was
very, very funny.
And that was Fabian Velasco and Milos Mitrovic.
Mitrovic. Yeah.
Hopefully, I got those right.
So that's our Canadian horror shout out. Good job, guys.
Yeah. Next one for me is called, this was like a really short one, and I think that's why it worked for me. It was called The Community, and it's
okay. I didn't see this one.
It's directed by, is it directed by the same? One sec, I just have to. This didn't have a letterbox, so I have to double check here. Oh, this was actually directed by Milos again, and I didn't even realize it.
There you go.
So that's pretty
cool. Made it twice.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. This was also a kind of a comedy one, much more straightforward comedy than any horror aspect to it. But it's essentially about some guy that meets this dude that he's very intrigued by. But he has the guy that he's intrigued by has this presentation of like that dude that acts like he knows what's going on in the American government. And, you know, he's just like, I've got all the answers, man. He's like teaching him almost how to be a man or something like that. And it seems as if it's a little bit of a weird, confusing short, to be honest, but I found it funny because it seems as if in this world, at least from what I could tell in the context, seeing naked people or porn is very difficult. And he tells him that he's got this thing that he wants to show him in the woods, and he brings him out to a laptop and, you know, tries to get onto a porn website, and there's no Wi-Fi, obviously. So he's like, oh shit, I don't have access to it. And then they find two other men that are in there that are acting as if they're also not looking for porn, and they find each other, and the one guy just outright says, you know what? We're looking for porn. And they kind of form this like community or brotherhood just based on that. And it's very ridiculous and kind of stupid. But it leans into that, and it's like 3.5 minutes or something like that. And it's just, you know, it's about a couple guys finding brotherhood. And I found it to be pretty funny. So, yeah, so that one's called The Community.
Cool. And Milos making two Canadian shorts in the batch.
Yeah, he's a funny guy.
I think I only have 2 more. I know one of them is one that you've seen, so I'll save that one for you. But the other one, I don't know if you saw this one or not. The other really big standout one for me was called O or Zero. I don't really know. It's basically just like the letter O or like a zero. That's just the title.
Oh, okay.
And it's a German one directed by Dominic Balco. And it is it's stated as a quote unquote surreal portrayal of addiction. But essentially what it is it's this very stark black and white horror short, and it follows this woman who just while walking along a street, she spots like this fist-sized hole in a wall, and she's kind of entranced by how endless it is and how dark it is, and she decides to put her hand into it, and she puts her hand and then eventually her whole arm into it, and she kind of creepily smiles, and she's very clearly kind of enjoys it, and she becomes so sort of hypnotically driven by this like new desire that's been opened up by spotting this hole, that she decides she now starts wanting to do that with everything. She starts putting her hands into her vacuum cleaner until her skin actually starts like tearing off. She feels the desire to shove her hands in her mouth because her mouth is a hole. And it eventually leads to this very absurd and pretty creepy imagery where she looks at her belly button and she goes, I'm going in. I want to know what's in there. So she literally grabs essentially these scissors or a knife and starts slicing open her stomach.
Oh my God.
And this is depicted from actually the inside of her stomach, where there is basically this goopy witch beckoning her from inside her belly button to keep going further in. And so in scale wise, it's like a little tiny witch, and you can see like the skin flaps opening up as like the blade is coming in. And this witch has like a hole instead of an eyes and forehead. She almost looks like the black and white, like otherworldly stuff in Twin Peaks: The Return. That's how she's kind of designed to look on the inside. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like it turns into like this cosmic thing where she's getting so much, it's almost like she's traveling through space by cutting into her stomach and viewing this other world with other creatures in it. And then the last shot is her just essentially, it goes back to like the realism where she has just sliced a hole in her stomach, mutilated herself, and killed herself.
Holy shit.
And that's it.
That's wild.
And then it just ends with a big O, and it's like a smoke ring and a black hole. And so like that's where the title comes from as well. So it's literally just like this O. She's entranced by this circle.
Oh man, that sounds
but
good.
It was cool.
I might check that one out after. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll actually let you.
That was one of the longer ones I did too. That was like 15 minutes or something like that.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of longer ones, I kind of have one too. I'll let you do the rat catcher's daughter. Just because I did have another one here. This one I was like kind of back and forth about because I think it takes a little bit too long to get to its big like moment, which when it happens, man, I'm losing my voice today. When it happens, you kind of know that that's where the whole thing was leading to, and it is impressive looking and kind of scary and all of that. But essentially, it's called In the Dark, and it's directed by Bronson Allen. And it's essentially about two people that are going out on a date, and it starts with the girl kind of being like, I've been out with a bunch of these weirdos. Like one guy was collecting his toenail clippings in a jar because he thought it like warded away spirits and that kind of thing. So she's just like hoping that this date is going to go smoothly and it's going to be a normal guy and all that. So she gets there and it is going well. They have a charming back and forth. You know, they're attracted to each other, all of that. But then she realizes that all of the lights in his house have this kind of like barricade so that the lights always stay on. They absolutely cannot be shut off. And so she kind of just is curious about that. And when they're about to have sex, she wants the lights off. And he just keeps turning them on because he's kind of scared. And he explains to her that back when he was a kid, there was this kind of entity that would be at the front of his bed as long as it was dark out or dark inside. And he just thinks that if it happens again, it will return. And she thinks, you know, he's being kind of silly. She's nice to him, and she promises that she'll stay for the night until he sleeps. And then when she leaves, because she's just kind of like, I don't know if this is the guy for me anymore, she turns off the lights and says something like, grow up. And as soon as she leaves, she starts to hear like a rumble. And then she walks in, and this fucking giant creature that looks very mean and angry with these like huge gnarling teeth and giant claws is just slitting his throat incredibly violently. And I really liked it. And then it kind of ends on her seeing this, going back to her place, and now she's collecting her toenail clippings for protection, and like her house is like rigged to have all the lights on and all of that. And she's kind of startled, and it ends there. I liked all of the effects, and you know, some of the lead up I think was really good and necessary for that big moment. It's just that I think it takes a little too long to get there, especially for the overall just kind of gag and point that it's making. But once it does get to that point, you're like, oh, that was pretty gnarly. I did enjoy that. So nice. I'm kind of cross between it. I don't know if I really liked it overall, but I would suggest still watching it just because there's a good gag in it. So yeah, that was In the Dark.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think the last one we're going to talk about here is one that Jamie and I both saw.
Yes.
And that one is I think the one animated short inclusion that we have here, which is called The Rat Catcher's Daughter. And it actually screened in front of the Neil Marshall film when it played. It is directed by Jim Bryson and Adam Jeffcoat, and yeah, it is a cool little short. I mostly picked this one because I really respect the gruesomeness and the animation design that they went for.
Yeah,
I don't know like exactly everything that it was that they were kind of getting at with the giant rat monster revolution. Like I wasn't exactly sure what it was that, you know, dramatically I was supposed to be getting out of it, but I was impressed with it as just a piece of design work because it's set in 1920s Petrograd, and it's about these revolutionary rats who basically rise from the underground sewers and become these very murderous creatures, and it's supposed to unite one where there's this character called the Rat Catcher and his daughter, obviously, who's the main character, and this sort of like young revolutionary who she becomes kind of swept up in, and they both have to fend off these essentially giant rats in like cult robes. Yeah. And the entire style is like grayscale except for red, so that you can see his sort of like revolutionary patch on his jacket, and also every bit of blood. Yeah, very Sin City. Yeah, it definitely has like, like a little bit of a comic quality to that as well, like comic book. Like I thought a little bit about some of like the Hellboy imagery as well, a little bit while watching this. Just with like the way that they use like the oversized jackets and like the maces and the eventual flamethrowers. Like it feels like it has like a little bit of that dark, stark noir.
Yeah, and before they're doing like that kind of revolutionary romanticism a little bit between the daughter and the revolutionary, which I did kind of like before it just breaks into like pure genre violence.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was cool, and the main reason I'm including it is because I was just like, I definitely thought it was a little bit long for me not being sure exactly what I was supposed to be getting out of it, but I was like, this is an incredibly bloody and dark piece of animation that stylistically the last time I had seen someone try to do these kinds of designs in this kind of location for animation, I'm pretty sure it was the 1997 Fox animation Anastasia, which is also set in like the 1910s or 1920s Petrograd, Russia. So I was like, wow, seeing that, but done in this almost like over the top, violent, Hellboy-ish almost kind of quality. I was like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
It's neat.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I really enjoyed the style of it. I enjoyed the genre switch when it eventually came. I do probably think it was a little overlong. That could have been my fault, just not understanding all of its context. But yeah, I thought it was really good. I love seeing quality animation, and this definitely has it. So yeah, I enjoyed it as well.
Hell yeah. Well, I think that's it for the genre shorts that Jamie and I saw at Toronto After Dark, and those are all the features that we watched and everything as well. So thanks so much for listening and for hanging out. And I would normally we say thanks for being patrons, but we're not exactly sure who in here is listening over on the main feed and who's the patrons, but we've been getting a lot of patrons recently, so thanks so much to everyone who's been supporting. And if you liked this and you want to hear us talk about more hear more bonus transmissions, this is kind of what they're like. We just talk about new release genre stuff, and we do have one coming out in the next week where we're going to be talking about the Munsters and Halloween Ends and Smile and a lot of really big stuff that has come out recently, so look forward to that. And also we are in Halloween week, so look forward to some absolute craziness on the way. We have a double feature virtual screening night coming up soon on the 28th. We have the Halloween episode where we're talking about slashers. We're going to be talking about Blood Rage and Grave Robbers. So lots of Halloween stuff to look forward to on the way. And and once again, thanks to Adam and Christian for giving us press access to the Toronto After Dark films. We
thank you.
Definitely think that you should put a couple of these on your radar. Like there's a couple of them that probably won't come out until later in the year, but we could absolutely see them on the honorable mentions at the end of the year, especially like Hazard and Evil Eye, which I was impressed by. So but yeah, I think that will wrap it up for this bonus transmission on the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.